Good evening and welcome to NTD's The Nation Decides 2024. I'm Steve Lance.
And I'm Tiffany Meier.
And here with us at the desk is political strategist and national trial attorney with Mills and Edwards, Dante Mills, and former Republican presidential campaign policy advisor, Bart Marcois. And in less than an hour, Vice President Kamala Harris and former President Donald Trump will face off in Philadelphia. It's a highly anticipated debate that analysts are calling consequential to the political future of both candidates.
And on the ground there in Philly, in the debate spin room, we've got NTD Washington correspondent Iris Tao, NTD national correspondent Jason Blair at the Harris Campaign Debate Watch Party, and here at HQ, NTD election data analyst Dave Martin. First, let's go to the spin room. Iris, how has the former president been preparing for this speech?
Good evening to all of you. So as we know, former President Trump has stayed largely active on the campaign trail in the days leading up to this debate. Instead of doing formal debate prep, he's opting in for more informal policy sessions with his advisors. And we also know that he's been prepping with former Democratic Congressman Tulsi Gabbard, as well as a GOP Congressman Matt Gaetz. Both have been fielding him with questions for this debate leading up to tonight. Meanwhile, we also know that just 2 days ago, some of them, including Congressman Gaetz as well as Gabbard, they told reporters during a press call that one of Trump's biggest strategies tonight will be to really try to tie Vice President Harris to her record, not only as the VP, but also as the Attorney General, the district attorney, and tying her to what they call her liberal record and try to compare and contrast Trump's policies and record with hers. So we do expect to hear a lot of things such as, you promised to do this on day one of your presidential administration, but why didn't you do it throughout the past 3 years? So expect to hear a lot of that from Trump tonight. We also know that Trump will be focusing on issues such as inflation, crime, the border, as well as international affairs such as the two wars going on right now, as well as the Afghanistan withdrawal. And tonight in the spin room, we are hearing from a lot of big names from both campaigns. And just now we heard from, for example, RFK Jr., who is stumping for Trump right here tonight, as well as other senators and congressmen, and they're offering their perspective on their expectation for tonight's debate, as well as after the debate, they will be here in the spin room to offer their narrative to defend their candidate's performance. Back to you.
Iris, thank you. And also in Philly is NTD national correspondent Jason Blair, who's at a Harris Campaign Watch Party. Jason, how has Harris been preparing for this debate?
Yeah, so Trump and Harris have been taking quite a different approach preparing for the debate. Harris has definitely taken a more formal approach for preparing. She was out in Pittsburgh doing some training, some debate training with Karen Dunn, who has trained a lot of Democrats over the years, including Barack Obama and Hillary Clinton. She was reportedly originally going to try to hammer Trump with questions during the debate, but since the mic rule changed to being muted, she reportedly changed strategies, and now she's been advised to more focus on policy to differentiate herself from Trump. Now, Trump, on the other hand, has been taking a more unconventional approach, a little more casual. He's still been active on the campaign trail. He was in Wisconsin on Saturday, and he's been, meeting with the press, but he's also said he's been having meetings about it, and people have been giving him advice. He's reportedly been told to also focus on policy and try to talk about Harris's past record when she was an AG in California, when she was a senator, and really talk about the things that she supported back then and take more of that approach. So overall, it's also kind of difficult. They've been saying they're not quite sure what Trump is going to do and how he's going to approach the debate. So that is definitely going to be something interesting to watch.
All right, Jason, thank you. And let's go now to the hub with NTD's Dave Martin, who's got the debate rules for us. Dave, take it away.
Thank you, Tiff. Now, as we wait for tonight's debate to get started, let's go ahead and take a look at the debate rules as agreed upon by Donald Trump and Kamala Harris. First off here, candidates cannot talk with their own campaign staff. Now, this is for the duration of this 90-minute debate, including both commercial breaks. Next up here, a coin flip determined the closing arguments. Now, Trump already won this. He chose to speak last. As a consolation, Kamala Harris then chose the podium on the right. Next up here, mics muted except when it's the candidate's turn to speak. Now, ABC can unmute both mics if they feel it's a relevant discussion going on. Next up here, no pre-written notes or opening statements. All they're going to go up there with is a pen, a pad of paper, and a bottle of water. And finally here, no live audience. Now, of course, these are pretty much the same rules as the Trump-Biden debate back on June 27. Now, as Jason mentioned, the mics muted rule became a hot topic between these two candidates. So I think it'll be interesting to see how or if either of these can actually use it to their advantage. But for right now, let's go back to the desk.
All right, Dave, thank you. And we will be checking in with everyone throughout the night.
And coming back to our guest in studio, Dante Mills and Bart Marcois. It's great to have you both. Dante, I want to start with you. Obviously, a big night for both candidates. How consequential do you see this debate being for either candidate?
Well, we've learned our lesson in June that debates can have consequences. That debate did not go well for President Biden, and he is no longer running to be reelected. So clearly, this can have some consequence depending on how you leave out of it. I think the issue here that I have is they decided to agree to no live mics. I think what that does is it takes away the ability to ask a pointed question. Because if I'm Vice President Harris, I have to use my allotted time and talk about as many things as I can. And when the question then goes to former President Trump, he can pick and choose what he wants to respond to. And during their prep, she did set it up where she would ask him specific questions that he would have to answer. But because of this debate format now, you can't do that. So I think it's going to now just go into kind of speeches that's going to cover a lot. And then you'll have a response that may or may not be responsive to the other person. I'm hoping we can get enough information out of that and at least some back and forth so that these ideas are hammered out and you don't just kind of say something flowery and move on. You get challenged on what your ideas are.
So, Bart, certainly a lot of fanfare leading into this debate with the microphones, a lot of other nuance, if you will. I believe Kamala Harris will have a slightly smaller podium to suit her stature. And I just wanted to get your thoughts on the microphone situation. Who do you think that this will ultimately benefit, having them muted, either candidate?
I think it'll benefit Trump, to be honest with you. This was a rule that the Biden campaign laid down and Trump was opposed to initially. But he went along with it because it was a hard and fast rule that the Biden team said we must have this. And he went along with it. It turned out well for him. It turned out very well for him. Trump has policies that people support. He had a presidency that people were happy under, that they prospered under. He has a personal style that a lot of Americans find grating. And muting that microphone kind of erased that personal style, that grating interference. His supporters think, hey, he's funny. You know, he just landed a zinger there. People want to hear policy. And if Trump debates policy and he talks about policy, and if he says, are you better off now than you were 4 years ago, he will win the debate. If it devolves into name calling or personal attacks, I think he will lose the debate. And muting the microphones helps focus him on policy and on asking that question over and over and over. And then that gives him a definite advantage.
But yeah, I think I agree with you in that, but we talked about it a little bit before. The purpose of a debate is to find that middle ground where you're actually exchanging some ideas and you have that back and forth. Well, I think this, why did you say this? And then the person can respond and you can respond to that. When you have muted mics, it's essentially going to be one speech or soliloquy after another, right? Yeah. It's no jostling, which I think as a country we need to accept because that's how you make progress. Put those ideas on the table, allow them to have a back and forth, and then you hopefully come out with a better idea. Removing that option, I think, is a disservice to the country, even though we should hear some policy, but it's going to be really in speech format.
In fairness, just to follow up, it does, appear that the muted mics were a request for the Democrats back when Biden debated Trump. Why do you think sort of the swap in strategy? Because
of the style of the candidate. President Biden, as we saw, he just wasn't in a position to jockey back and forth. He just wasn't in a position to do that. I also think it impacted him, and it was a wrong call because as he was sitting there with a muted mic, he would lose focus, and I think a lot of people saw that with the split screen. But with Vice President Harris, she's an attorney. She's used to being in that courtroom where it's a back and forth. You have opposition on the other side, and you guys are going back and forth, arguing to the judge, proving your case, asking questions, follow-up questions. That's her style she's comfortable with. I think she would really benefit from that, which is why I can see why former President Trump wanted to say, oh, wait, I'm following the same rule that we had under President Biden.
And there's certainly a lot of time to discuss a lot of different issues we're going to dig into. Right now, we're going to dig into the issue of housing some more. With us now is Senior Research Fellow on Housing Policy at the American Institute for Economic Research, Jason Sorens. Jason, thank you so much for joining us. Jason,
Good evening. Can you hear me?
Jason, great. So we have established communication. Both candidates, Jason, who are set to debate soon, expected to lay out their plans to make housing more affordable. Both Harris and Trump want to increase supply. For Harris, that would mean tax breaks for home builders and billions in incentives for local governments to relax zoning regulations. How likely is this kind of policy to translate into more affordable housing for the American people?
Great question. So Harris is the only one of the two to release a detailed housing plan at this stage. And she says she wants to get 3 million new units built. It's unclear exactly how that's going to happen. So she has proposed this $40 billion innovation fund that would incentivize localities to allow for more housing. Economists do think that the primary reason for the housing crunch now is that even as housing demand has increased since the pandemic, local governments have restricted supply with strict zoning regulations. And so this could be a way of freeing up housing supply, but we just haven't seen the details yet on that. The other elements of her housing plan could, in fact, make things worse. For example, she has a proposal to subsidize first-time home buyers. That might sound good to people who would get that subsidy, but if you goose demand like that, if you encourage more people to buy, that could actually cause prices to go up for everyone else.
Now, former President Trump also has been talking about increasing supply. He has a bit of an interesting take on it, doing it on federal lands. Cato reports that the federal government owns a significant amount of land in certain states like California and Colorado. Do you see opening up more federal lands as a viable strategy to lower housing costs?
It's a solid first step, and the Biden administration, in fairness, has also proposed doing just this. We actually have cross-party agreement now. The only problem is that the majority of federal land is very far from population centers. So really the one area where this would make the biggest difference is the Las Vegas metropolitan area. Federal government owns a lot of land in that area. And so if they freed it up for housing development, especially if they don't put too much red tape on it, which is the one thing I'm worried about, but if they sell it to private developers, that could create a lot of housing in that area.
Now, switching gears a bit, how would increasing energy production here in the United States, like oil, like gas, like coal, impact the cost of housing for Americans?
There are complex effects of energy on housing. The most straightforward effect is that it should reduce the cost of housing because energy is an input into the construction industry. I would say even more, if you could reduce the cost of materials. There's a large tariff, a tax on Canadian lumber coming into this country. Unfortunately, the Biden administration did increase that. So that is another big factor in the cost of housing. But if you could reduce energy costs, that would reduce construction costs. It would probably also encourage people to move further away from cities, because if energy costs are lower, it's cheaper to drive, and so you get more development in rural areas.
Jason Sorens, really appreciate your perspective. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.
And we will leave the discussion right there for now, but we'll return after this very short break with a lot more for you, so stay with us.
بیست و سه سال
16 سال
عمري ما هفت
اما داعش کردیان برانبر خشک و دایکانی ازدی ما کاری که دور لهمو چم که دموکراسی و موافقانی مرو و انسانیت او بارو خی که است های به تایبت لعراق و سوریه بشه که دگرت و با حالانه که اداره اوباما کرد
ریم بو او هفت روز بو و داعش از کرد
تامبوم كرا قوتينيز قريا بما متشكر بهر في ذا نبو باوان رحمنا
ودمنا سؤالنا من خادران نزر باوان نفستم بس نا ما go بس ناش بيجوش باش.
They would literally be auctioned in front of soldiers, and then the soldiers begin to bid.
زاروي بان همو جيبر تي حملي زاروي الدم واسسي بان همو جيبر
وحشیگریه که توا عیاره ظلمی که یک جار زور گوره لما افرطانه کرا و تعدایی که زور زوریان لیده که اما نه روزانه دست فروشیده
اليوم التوزيع كل الرصيد
Imagine being a child, having a child mentality, and these evil people come and wheel you away from the only safety you've ever known.
When I drink it, the first thing was I feel the warmth in my tummy. It's kind of like gently radiating out, a kind of a very comforting warmth. And it was really good, actually. I felt much better. I did feel, actually, the effect. And I find that it is actually better when I take it regularly.
It's actually steamed and dried 9 times. And so it's really, the essence is really extracted.
Then the second time, I tried it really like on an empty stomach and just 2 teaspoons of it, and over a few times. And wow, there was a big difference, because suddenly I could feel, wow, I was very good energized. I didn't have to eat. I could work outside in the garden for a couple of hours, and I still felt very well. And I was impressed by that. So I think it's a good product.
And welcome back to The Nation Decides on NTD. I'm back in studio here with my colleague Tiffany Meier, Bart Marcois, Dante Mills. Guys, House Speaker Mike Johnson earlier was on CNN, and he was asked what advice he would give former President Trump. Here's what he said.
That has always been my advice, that we run this race on policy, on record, not rhetoric, on policy, not personality. Kamala Harris was the most liberal member of the Senate in the modern era. She was to the left of Bernie Sanders. She has a life.
So Bart, that's the advice that you were giving for President Trump just a short moment ago.
Yeah, that's, I wonder if Speaker Johnson was listening to me talking to my wife yesterday. That's what really matters. I was very disheartened to hear Liz Cheney talking about saying she was going to vote for Kamala Harris, and somebody said, how can you do that given some of the things, some of the policies that she's done? And she said, for me, this election is not about policy. Leaving unsaid the corollary to that, it's about personality. There is a visceral hatred of Donald Trump from the establishment, both parties, but It's sometimes worse from the Republican establishment figures, the people who used to control the Republican Party. There's a fear and a loathing of him. But, you know, for every person, for every disaffected establishment Republican that feels that way about President Trump, there are 7 or 8 people who have never voted Republican, many who have never voted for anybody in their lives, who are inspired by him because of his policies, because he's taking on the swamp, because he's going after the corruption in both parties. And they're turning out in droves. And you're seeing odd for you know, American politics for the last several decades, an unusual demographic shift and change in support. And it's because they're looking at policy and they're saying, I was better off under Donald Trump. I don't care what he said. I don't care what he tweeted. I was better off, and so was everybody I know. And I'm a little tired of being taken advantage of by the Democrats, or I'm a little tired of being taken advantage of by the Republicans. And that's what you're seeing, and you're seeing this crossover.
But I think better off could have multiple definitions. It's all relative. Yes, there is some policy, and specifically economic policy, that former President Trump is really strong at. But if he makes people feel like they don't matter, that's equally as important. You're the president of the United States, the most pivotal position probably in the world. And some people want their president to walk with integrity, to make people feel good about themselves. And we can't say that's not important or shouldn't be important to people. Yes, there's some people who say, this is the one policy thing that I'm going to hang my hat on. If he's good on the economy or immigration, I'm going to vote with him no matter what. But there's other people who say, oh, he may be good on that, but the way he makes everybody else feel, or the way he talks about people or incites other people to act, I'm not comfortable voting for him, and I'll take a little less money in my pocketbook, or I'll give a little bit on this policy because I want our leader to be somebody that people look up to. And I don't think there's a wrong decision in that. People have the right to make up their mind.
But people, for most Americans, for most people in the world, politics is a dinner table issue. It costs nearly twice as much to feed a family now as it did when President Trump was in the White House. And that is directly tied to the Biden-Harris economic policies. And I don't care how somebody makes me feel, if I can't buy eggs and if I can't buy milk and if I can't buy fresh vegetables, I can't feed my family. If I can't put gas in my car, I can't get to work. I can't do the things. I don't have the freedom. I don't have the liberty to make my decisions. And honestly, for most people in the country, what happens in Washington and what somebody says in Washington just doesn't matter. They want to be left alone and raise their families and have the resources that they need in order to make those decisions for themselves.
But
that's what they're looking for.
That's not true, and you have to look at who you are, right? And your stature, your race, your gender, all of that factors in. There are some people who would love to be able to say that, but they felt unsafe when Donald Trump was president of the United States. So they may say, I'm willing to forego one meal on my table if I feel safe because everybody else isn't being incited to hate me. So you have to factor that in, and just because it may not affect you personally and gives you the ability to say, I'm going to vote strictly on policy, there's some people who don't have that luxury, and we have to account and leave space for both.
I grew up in a household where I had to forego a lot of meals. We were very poor. We literally did not have enough to eat frequently. We literally went to bed hungry because we had very little to eat. And I'll tell you what, there are a lot more people out there. For them, saying that they would rather focus on how somebody makes them feel or how somebody, talking about feelings rather than actually financial security, they're looking at that and saying, how can you even say that? When you're living on the edge, that's not quite life and death, but close to life and death sometimes. When you're living on the edge, when you have a lot of money, when you're comfortable, and it's just a matter of saying, hey, you know what? I can't go out. I can only go out once or twice a week now. For the way a lot of people grow up, they go out to eat once or twice a quarter, once a month, once every 2 or 3 months, if they go out at all. And it's a matter of deciding, do we have mac and cheese again or do we have spaghetti?
There's validity to that, but there's also first generation, say, Venezuelans that are here legally, but are afraid to leave their house because they may be locked up because former President Trump convinced everybody around them that they're a criminal. And they are the ones who may say, that's why I'm not voting for Donald Trump, even though I may be able to go out one more day a week. So we just have to leave space for that. I'm not saying that your vision or your view of that is wrong, or you should choose who you vote for based on how it impacts other people. You're going to decide what's important to you, but there's other people who are going to do the same.
I'm smiling because I happen to do a lot of consulting work with Venezuelans. I know a lot of Venezuelans, and they overwhelmingly, it was just a poor example, I know what you mean, but they overwhelmingly support President Trump. It's in an immigrant community, when a criminal element from an immigrant community comes to the United States, it's other members of the immigrant community that they prey on the worst. And the Venezuelan Americans who've been here for 5 years or 4 years or longer are more terrified of the new immigrants who've come in since Maduro released people from prisons than anybody else, because they know them. They're coming to them first. So I reject the premise that economic decisions don't matter and that they're not paramount.
This is a very good discussion. We're going to hold it here for a moment. Right now, we obviously have the high-stakes debate coming up in just minutes away. Right now, NTD's Iris Tao is at the Spin Room in Philadelphia. Iris, what can you report to us?
Good evening to all. So right now, apparently the atmosphere right here is heating up as we're getting closer and closer to that first debate, and actually the first time that Trump and Harris will actually meet in person. And meanwhile, we have heard from many different surrogates here in the Spin Room who represent both of the candidates and are trying to defend or preview their performance. For example, we heard from Congressman Byron Donalds with the Republican Party, who told me that he thinks tonight's debate will be a turning point in this race that will reduce Vice President Harris's momentum going forward. We know that Harris has been enjoying some momentum after Biden dropped out. She entered the race and after DNC and laying out her policies. But Congressman Donald says that's not going to last very long. Listen. And do you think tonight's debate could be a turning point in this race?
Honestly, I think tonight's debate is going to continue a trend line we're already seeing. And that is the support strength for Kamala Harris is going to start dwindling. It's just like going to start leaking slowly. Because what's her ratings right now in New York Times Siena? 48, 47, 49, somewhere around there? Okay. But the durability of that support is not strong. Donald Trump's support is strong. That thing ain't going nowhere.
And that's actually what the Trump campaign has been telling me as well during different meetings. They said that the more that they think Vice President Harris talks, the better it is for them. Well, we don't know whether that's true, especially we don't know how the debate tonight will turn out, but that's how the Trump campaign is predicting things. Meanwhile, we know that a lot of issues are on board tonight, including which foreign policy as well as China policy. I asked Senator Rick Scott, who's been a very outspoken advocate on Chinese human rights issues, about what he thinks that both candidates should talk about tonight on that watch. Senator, you've been very outspoken on China. How do you think President Trump tonight should address the question of China policy?
So I don't know if they'll come up, but China is a disaster for the United States. They are intentionally killing Americans. They're sending fentanyl across the border. 76,000 people died of fentanyl last year. They lie about every trade deal. They don't comply with any trade deal. They don't comply with the WTO. I think we've got to get American jobs back, and China has to stop stealing our jobs. I hope when they do talk about it, they talk about how they're going to get American jobs back, and I know that part of it's going to have to be tariffs. We're losing middle-income jobs. We're losing full-time jobs.
But I also asked former President Trump at different press conferences about his take on China policy, and he told me that he wants to have a good relationship with China, but it has to be a fair one. Trump has vowed to implement what he called the Reciprocity Act, which he says will make the U.S. basically make sure that China pays the same tariffs that is charging the U.S. when it comes to trade and different goods. And he says that's to make sure that American jobs stay in the U.S. as well as prices here will not be affected by those policies as well. But tonight we do expect Harris to challenge him on his tariff policy as well as other issues. Back to you.
Iris Tao, excellent reporting live at the Spin Room in Philadelphia. Thank you, Iris. And the Epoch Times senior editor, Yanya Kalik, is also in the Spin Room this evening, speaking to attendees. He asked Senator LaFonza Butler about the key issues Harris needs to address to reach undecided voters. Here's a look at that.
What do you see as the key issues that she needs to reach the undecided voters with?
I think this is, voters are going to want to, as they've already communicated, going to want to know more about who she is, what kind of leader she is. I think she's going to be talking about that. I think the issues that are top of mind for voters right now is, am I going to be more free tomorrow? And is the next generation of Americans going to have the same essential freedoms as their parents and grandparents? And she's going to be talking about that, voting rights, abortion and reproductive care. She's going to, families all across this country are talking about the high price and cost of living. And she has an actual plan to address some of the key drivers that families are facing. Rent, mortgage accessibility, their ability to actually buy groceries and bring prices down. She's going to be talking about the cost of prescription drugs for our seniors and for everyone in the community. And so I think that she's going to be talking about those pocketbook issues as well as the issues that are fundamental to our democracy. She's going to extend an invitation to folks who've not yet made up their mind that the Harris Walls campaign is a campaign that they can see a future for themselves and their families.
Our special coverage. Stay with us.
There's a whirlwind of emotion and activity going on in this painting. And there's chaos all around and threat from below. The walls surrounding her, and they're anything but unmoved. They're moving all the time, and we sense that. But this little girl remains unmoved.
She's in quite a perilous situation, but she's completely strong and serene, and she's actually meditating. It was very, very well liked because no matter what culture or what sort of walk of life you're from, I think people, they see it and they immediately understand what that energy, what that message is, and they're drawn to it because everybody kind of needs a little bit of that in their own life, of, you know, the steadfast calmness and something to hold on to. It's definitely an inner peace in the midst of something very chaotic, and for a lot of people right now, the whole world is very, very chaotic. So I guess that's another reason why so many people are very drawn to this.
adopting you was the best decision in our life. And I am so proud to call you my son.
And welcome back to The Nation Decides 2024 on NTD Television. Let's now dive into more of the issue of immigration, one of this year's top issues. Joining us now is retired Chief of U.S. Border Patrol, Rodney Scott. Rodney, thank you so much for joining.
Thank you for having me on this evening. Appreciate it.
Of course. Rodney, the bipartisan immigration bill that Harris wants to sign into law includes building up more of the southwest border, hiring more Border Patrol and immigration judges, as well as giving the federal government more power to limit illegal immigration. Could this bill have an overall positive impact at the border and the U.S. immigration system at large?
No. To be totally transparent, the only thing bipartisan about that bill was the opposition to it. It was negotiated in a bipartisan manner, but that bill died under the light of transparency, the light of day. I advocated strongly against it once I read it. People don't pay attention, but to cure the border problems we have today, you have to end catch and release. That bill mandated in law that certain groups of illegal aliens would be released into the United States, immediately given work authorization, and mandated that we accept at least 1,400 illegal aliens into ports of entry every day. That was a horrible bill, and it should have never have seen the light of day.
And to your point, Rodney, I believe there were 0 House Republicans that voted for it when it was in the House, and maybe only 2 senators, Republican senators, when it made its way into the Senate. Now, on the topic of hiring more Border Patrol agents, is this kind of investment that could lead to saving more lives at the border, both of illegal border crossers and victims of human trafficking?
So as a former chief, I would never say that we don't need more Border Patrol agents, but Border Patrol agents are the most expensive resource that the United States taxpayer pays for in border security. Very, very critical piece. But there are many other tools. The border wall system that was going in place makes every single agent more effective. It allows them to cover more area. It slows down the flow of illegal immigration into the United States. And then it really allows the agents more time to do in-depth interviews, which is where you'll get the real vetting. And without being able to slow down that flow, you can't hire enough agents to process the volume of illegal immigrants from around the world that come into this country. It has to be a strategic, thought-out process. Yes, more agents are part of it, but you have to stem the flow, and you have to make sure there's consequences to illegal immigration. And please, before we get too far, this is about border security from my perspective. It's about knowing and controlling who and what enters the United States. Illegal immigration is a symptom and a problem with border security, but border security is much bigger than just immigration.
Now, Rodney, former President Trump says that he is committed to carrying out the largest deportation operation in U.S. history with a focus on criminals. How feasible is an operation like this when authorities in cities like, say, New York and Chicago, both popular destinations, mind you, for illegal immigrants, restrict cooperation with ICE?
It is feasible, but jurisdictions, sanctuary jurisdictions like the entire state of California, like Chicago, like New York, make it extremely difficult for ICE to go in and do their job in those areas, but they can't prohibit ICE from doing it. It just makes it more difficult. But here's the deal. If you don't have consequences for a crime, you're going to see the people willing to do that crime explode. We're talking here about people that have exhausted every one of their legal avenues. The courts have said you have no right to be in the United States. A judge has ordered them removed, and ICE needs to go remove them. The reason it's going to be the largest deportation in history is because we've had the largest mass illegal immigration in history.
Rodney Scott, really appreciate you joining us. We appreciate your perspective. Thank you.
Thank you.
And let's go now to the Data Hub with NTD's Dave Martin. Dave, what do you have for us?
Thank you, Tiff. Now, as the debate gets closer to starting, I wanted to take a look at how Harris and Trump were doing in the presidential race, polling specifically the swing states here. Let's start first with Arizona, 11 electoral votes. Now, this is at Emerson College polling among likely voters dated August 25th to 28th. You can see here Arizona, 11 electoral votes. He's got a 3% lead here over Kamala Harris. How about Georgia? 16 electoral college votes here. Harris actually the slight lead here over Trump, 49 to 48. What about Michigan? 15 electoral college votes here. Harris, the 3-point lead now over Donald Trump. And what about Nevada? 6 electoral college votes here. Harris, again, the slight lead over Donald Trump. But what about North Carolina? 16 electoral college votes. Now, North Carolina is what Trump took each of the last 2 years. It's the only swing state he's won both times. A very slight lead, 1% over Kamala Harris. Finally, the big one, Pennsylvania, 19 electoral votes. A dead heat. Now, this has been back and forth all summer. It's tied right up here right now. And finally, Wisconsin, 10 electoral votes here. Trump a slight lead. Now, in all 7 states, all are within the margin of error. As you can see here, Harris had a lead in 3 of them, Trump had a lead in 3 of them, and they're tied to 1, so a very close race. But of course, it begs the questions, what are voters' top issues? How can they sway some of these voters? Well, let's take a look at that here, too. Top voter issues. This is according to a YouGov poll dated September 1 to 3 among U.S. adult citizens. 26% said inflation and prices was their top issue. This is number 1 on the polling here. The second biggest, 12% said jobs and the economy was their top voter issue. And right behind them, immigration at 11%. That's actually doubled over the past 2 years. Right behind that, healthcare at 10%. Now, what if we include by party ID here? We've got Democrats, Independents, and Republicans. Now, as you can see here, inflation and prices is still number 1 here among all 3 groups, especially Independents at 29%. And as well here in jobs and economy, 15%. So it's actually higher than all voters in both those 2 categories. Now, of course, immigration, a very divisive one. More than 1 in 5 Republicans say that is their top issue, but only 1 in 50 Democrats say that's their top issue. Almost conversely here, healthcare, 4 times as many Democrats said this is their top issue over Republicans. So I think it's going to be very interesting to see how Trump and Harris, try to appeal to some of these independent voters tonight in order to sway some votes more to their side. But in any case, let's go back now to the desk.
All right, Dave, thanks for that. And let's check in now with NTD's Jason Blair, who's at the Harris Campaign Debate Watch Party. Jason, what do you have for us?
Yeah, hey, so things are getting started over here. The debate is about 15 minutes away. People are starting to come in. It's getting, pretty energetic. There's a DJ playing. They got food. There were a couple speakers that just spoke. We heard from the DNC chair, Jamie Harrison, PA House Speaker Joanna McClinton, the Lieutenant Governor Austin Davis, and Governor Josh Shapiro just spoke. So things are starting to, get pretty hyped up. People are starting to get hyped up here. And a lot of people are saying that this is a very important debate, especially for Harris. She gets a chance to kind of show a lot of the people that are on the fence and really have been wondering more about her. The polls have definitely been saying, since July, they've been saying that Trump and Harris are neck and neck, pretty much within 2% of each other. And in all the swing states, pretty much since July, they've been saying the same thing. So this is a really good chance for both the candidates to really appeal to these swing voters, these undecided voters, and show them what they got and what they have to offer them.
All right, Jason, thanks for that update. And now back to our panel, Dante Mills and Bart McCoy. Now, we've been hearing, a lot. You were just talking about how everyone seems to know Trump and what his term would mean. Now, 28% of likely voters in a recent New York Times Siena College poll said they feel they need to learn more about Kamala Harris. Now, Dante, you were talking earlier about the debate format tonight. Given that format tonight, do you think people will be able to learn more about her?
I don't think so. Here's the issue, and a lot of times you go into a debate saying who has more to lose. I think it's clear that Kamala Harris has more to lose because she is still kind of riding with that new item polish that's going to fade off. And as you just heard at the map, 7 of those states are within the margin of error, all 7 of the critical states. Her shine is going to go off and her numbers are going to drop. We know that former President Trump is going to stay where he is. He has his people. They know who he is. They're with him or they're not. And that's who he has. Vice President Harris has to impress people tonight so that she raises her numbers, because if she just comes out of this even, then I think she loses this election. So she's going to have to impress people, and it's hard to impress people with canned speeches. And without a back and forth, that's what it may come down to, just kind of canned speeches, and nobody's going to get that aha moment of you calling someone out on their policy or you addressing something that they think is important and you show them that they're wrong about it. I don't know if we're going to have those moments because of this debate format, and Vice President Harris needs that because she has to come out of this as a winner in order for her numbers to go up.
Yeah. And Bart, given this format that we are working with, or the American people are working with tonight, what do you see as maybe the toughest questions or issues that Trump and Harris will have to face tonight?
I think for Harris, it's going to be, at some point, Donald Trump is going to say, you keep saying, on day one I'll do this, and on day one I'll do that, but day one was 3.5 years ago. Why haven't, you're there, you're in the White House. Why aren't you doing it right now? You're the acting president, for Pete's sake. Biden, where is Joe Biden? Why don't you do it now? Why are you waiting to do it? And Trump's biggest vulnerability, again, is personality. And I think Dante is right when he says there's a vulnerability there. There's so much to lose because she hasn't actually had anybody vote for her yet. People don't really know her yet. And if Trump can hold his own and pull in just 2 or 3 more percentage points, then he's over 50%. And if she goes into a word salad and one of these famous things that I think it hurts her. This setup actually reminds me of the Bush versus Gore debate, where Al Gore literally memorized speeches on every topic, 30 seconds, 60 seconds, 2 minutes, and you could just see him, oh, I have a speech for this, and it didn't help him. It hurt him. I don't know how she is preparing. I watched a lot of her debates in the past, and she has an almost patented trick of she's very good, just as Trump is, at issuing a stinger. She stung Joe Biden badly. She stung other people badly in previous debates, but then she got stung by Tulsi Gabbard. And so I think we're going to see some stings, and I think we'll see Trump stinging her. And both of them have the strategy of letting the other talk. So they might just be sitting there looking at each other for a while. I don't know.
Dante, right now the polls are basically just tied between the two. So given the format tonight, though, how do you see each candidate really trying to win over those independent or undecided voters in all of the swing states that they really do need to be able to win in November?
Well, I think former President Trump has the clear advantage. He can say, you know who I am, what kind of presidency I'm going to have. And he can say that the economy was good when I was in office. And that's his strong suit. So all he has to do is essentially hold the line. That's not what Vice President Harris has to do. She has to come with those stingers that Bart was just talking about. She made one in the Vice President's debate with Mike Pence. Will she be able to recreate that moment? But also, can she galvanize people to be excited about her, not just because she's new, but now transitioning to what she can do for them or who she can be for them? And that's going to come with her standing firm at this debate, being able to stand on her own. She did the interview recently, but had her vice presidential candidate along with her. I think that was a bad move. But right now, she'll have a notepad, a pen, and water. If she can stand on her own, I think she makes a statement that way, and it allows her to go up in the numbers and allows her to hold where she is. But if she doesn't make a statement tonight, there's not many chances left for her to show America who she truly is.
An important discussion, and we will be back with a lot more after this very short break, so stay with us. We'll have more in just a minute.
Where nature embraces you and fills you with invigorating joy. Treasuring every little moment as these romantic memories gather up to complete our blissful memories together. Mokpo.
As we naturally age, many people are getting zero amount of this incredible and unique substance. That's when we start seeing an impact in our joints, skin, nails, and even our digestion.
People ask me, Dr. X, what is the #1 supplement I should be taking? My answer is multi-collagen protein.
People's reactions to me, people were like, what are you doing? What is going on? You look amazing. You have a glow about you.
What makes Ancient Nutrition Multi-Collagen stand out from other brands? 10 types of collagen. It's grass-fed, pasture-raised with vitamin C and probiotics. It's proven to reduce joint discomfort rapidly, continuously, and persistently. It improves the appearance of crow's feet after 4 weeks and improves skin tone after 8 weeks. And it promotes hair thickness, growth, and a reduction in hair breakage.
It has transformed everything from my hair. Like, my hair was starting to kind of just, come out, and I don't have that anymore. My skin feels amazing.
Call the number on your screen and find out how to get a free bottle when you order, plus free shipping and our 30-day money-back guarantee. And as a bonus, we will include Dr. Josh Axe and Jordan Rubin's revolutionary book, Multi-Collagen Makeover, free with your order, plus free shipping and free returns.
I have implicit trust in Dr. Axe because the plan worked. I am living proof of it.
This is the collagen protein that is backed by clinical studies. It's what my family uses, it's what I use, and I know you're gonna benefit in a big way as well.
Love the results or get your money back. This special TV offer is not available in stores. Call the number on your screen or go online now.
My graduation was something I will never forget. People like you and me sometimes may have doubts in yourself, but I feel that everything's possible.
Find free adult education classes near you at finishyourdiploma.org.
Coverage of The Nation Decides. I'm Tiffany Meier.
And I'm Steve Lance. And in just a few moments, the presidential candidates will be facing off in Philadelphia in a debate some analysts are calling critical in the 2024 election.
And turning now to our guest, political strategist Dante Mills and former presidential campaign advisor Bart Marcois. Now, earlier we were talking about independence and how important it'll be to get that vote in this election, given the polls, how close they are, and also, as we're hearing from Dave earlier with the data in terms of all the swing states there, it seems a lot of people are still kind of on the fence. In tonight's debate, Dante, what do you think we'll be hearing from each candidate, or what should we be hearing from them to really make inroads in that?
Well, I think there's two completely different approaches to this, or there should be. Former President Trump should come in just trying to hold that line, not say anything, not piss people off, that he can lose votes unnecessarily. You know what he stands for, you know what his policy is going to be because he's done it before as president. So he should just go and say, guys, you know me. No matter what happens or what's said tonight, you can look at my policy and look at my economic policy and what was happening when I was president. On the other hand, you have Vice President Harris, who has to convince people, and specifically independent voters, who are now open to the idea, because maybe they were on the fence with former President Trump and then President Biden. Now they have another option, but is this other option safe for us? Are we going to be protected in our ideas? Is our country going to be protected? Is our pocketbook going to be protected? I think Vice President Harris has to work for those independents tonight. She shouldn't really focus on the far left. She should work for the people in the middle and make it clear that she's going to be a president for everybody and allow more people to add to that base, bring her numbers up so she can hold it through until after November when everybody votes.
If I could just follow up on that, Dante, how important is it, or is it important for her to try to untether herself from the past 4 years being part of that Biden-Harris ticket?
That's a tough line to walk, because what you want to do, and I think she's been doing it well so far, is you want to try to stay close to things that are positive and things that have been successful in the Biden administration, but at the same time distance yourself as much as possible for the things that weren't. It's a tough line to toe, but every politician has to do it. So she is going to come in, I believe, attaching herself to some things that worked. But she also has to accept and acknowledge that the economy could be better, right? And how do you do that when you're second in command? But you say, I'm following his policies. My policy, I think, is going to push us to be better, even though I don't think we're in a bad spot. So she has to walk that fine line, but I think she can do it and say, I'm not in alignment with everything in the current administration, but I get a firsthand view and I can decide what's beneficial and keep that going. And what's not working, I can pivot and do something to make America stronger.
And Bart, looking at some numbers here, a recent New York Times Siena College poll showed that roughly 61% of likely voters said the next president should represent a major change from President Biden. Only 25% of them said Harris represented that change. That's compared to 53% who said Trump did. In tonight's debate, what must Harris do to maybe change those numbers?
She has to show that she's unburdened by what has been. She cannot distance herself from the policies of the current administration. What is the slogan? Forward in a new way, new progress. I can't remember. It's very clever. It's a way of saying exactly what Dante was articulating there. She's gotten a slogan, but unfortunately, she's on the record as having been the tie-breaking vote for the really inaptly named Inflation Reduction Act, the bill that caused trillions of dollars of spending and has generated so much inflation. She broke the tie on that vote. She said she was the last person in the room when Biden made the decision to withdraw from Afghanistan. And for once in my life, the Republicans are doing something politically smart. They brought out a report, well-timed, right now, talking about Afghanistan and the really, really horrible decision-making that went into that. And for her, she said, I was the last person in the room and I was right there with him when he made that pullout. That's going to be hard to pull away from, that sort of thing.
And this has been a great discussion. However, it is the end of our pre-debate coverage of the ABC presidential debate, which you can watch on ntd.com.
And we will be back after the candidates make their closing statements at approximately 10:40 p.m. Eastern. We'll have highlights and a lot more when we return.
I'm Steve Lance.
And I'm Tiffany Meier.
And we'll see you soon on The Nation Decides.
Come to Mathis Home for the Monumental Savings Event and get big values on the latest bedrooms. This modern bed from Ashley with a floating panel design is a hot buy at just $290. This Ashley bed is only $399 with an upholstered headboard and a clean contemporary design. And this bed with a blonde finish even has charging ports for extra convenience. It's a great buy at just $699. Don't miss your chance to save at the Monumental Savings Event at Mathis Home.
Will radical lies determine your child's future, or will timeless truths? Fathom the Good equips children with wisdom against the world. Our homeschool curriculum teaches high schoolers to think critically. We provide primary texts, original content, reasoning tools, and mentoring videos to help them transform America. Teach your children to navigate the world's woke confusion. Teach them to fathom the good.
We design Native Path products to restore essential nutrients missing from the modern diet. This is what being on the path is all about. We're more than a health and wellness brand, we're a community.
There's a whirlwind of emotion and activity going on in this painting. And there's chaos all around and threat from below. The walls surrounding her, and they're anything but unmoved. They're moving all the time, and we sense that. But this little girl remains unmoved.
She's in quite a perilous situation, but she's completely
There are real consequences to controlled media. And NTD's founders know them firsthand. Our freedom of thought is the price. This is the lesson that guides us in everything we do.
So there's the tear gas there.
We know the value of a free society. And we take seriously the responsibility to preserve it. We are NTD.
I'm Arlene Richards here at the U.S. Supreme Court, and we are NTD News.
Hi, I'm Kelly Wright. We thank you for joining us and watching America's Hope here on NTD News. Bottom line is, I know you're sick and tired of being sick and tired, but let's give you some good news in the midst of the bad news. Watch us nightly, right here on NTD News, for a full dose of America's Hope.
NTD News, the fastest growing independent news source in America, bringing you breaking news from around the world. Expert analyses, investigative reporting, and original award-winning documentaries. We're known for our uncensored China coverage you won't find anywhere else. We cover the stories that affect you and shape our world without the political noise. We report from the heart with you in mind. Watch us right here on NTD News.
Want to know what's really happening around the world? Join us for a deep dive discussion with our expert panel on International Reporters Roundtable.
I'm Arian Pastar in South America, Brazil, and we are NTD News.
I'm Christina Corona in Los Angeles, and we are NTD News.
I'm David Lamb in the San Francisco Bay Area, and we are NTD News.
What's happened to this world we're living in? Why?
For the 4 years he has been on this earth, he has known nothing but war.
Wherever I go, the things I see, I just want to turn away. The dreams I have, the stories I could tell, will they still be possible? This year, more than ever, I need a brand new world, a clean world. Where I can improve myself and be inspired. My stage can be anywhere and everywhere, but it begins here.
Ganjing World, a brighter way of life.
What's happened to this world we're living in? Why?
For the 4 years he has been on this earth, he has known nothing but war.
Wherever I go, the things I see, I just want to turn away. The dreams I have, the stories I could tell, will they still be possible? This year, more than ever, I need a brand new world. A clean world. Where I can improve myself and be inspired. My stage can be anywhere and everywhere. But it begins here.
Ganjing World, a brighter way of life.
There are real consequences to controlled media. And NTD's founders know them firsthand. Our freedom of thought is the price. This is the lesson that guides us in everything we do.
Yeah, so there's the tear gas there.
We know the value of a free society. And we take seriously the responsibility to preserve it. We are NTD.
I'm Arlene Richards here at the U.S. Supreme Court, and we are NTD News.
Hi, I'm Kelly Wright. We thank you for joining us and watching America's Hope here on NTD News. Bottom line is, I know you're sick and tired of being sick and tired, but let's give you some good news in the midst of the bad news. Watch us nightly, right here on NTD News, for a full dose of America's Hope.
NTD News, the fastest growing independent news source in America, bringing you breaking news from around the world. Expert analyses, investigative reporting, and original award-winning documentaries. We're known for our uncensored China coverage you won't find anywhere else. We cover the stories that affect you and shape our world without the political noise. We report from the heart with you in mind. Watch us right here on NTD News.
Want to know what's really happening around the world? Join us for a deep dive discussion with our expert panel on International Reporters Roundtable.
I'm Arian Pastar in South America, Brazil, and we are NTD News.
I'm Christina Corona in Los Angeles, and we are NTD News.
I'm David Lamb in the San Francisco Bay Area, and we are NTD News.
There are real consequences to controlled media. And NTD's founders know them firsthand. Our freedom of thought is the price. This is the lesson that guides us in everything we do.
Yeah, so there's the tear gas there.
We know the value of a free society. And we take seriously the responsibility to preserve it. We are NTD.
I'm Arlene Richards here at the U.S. Supreme Court, and we are NTD News.
I'm Evelyn Lee in New York City, and we are NTD News.
I'm Kelly Wright in New York City, and we are NTD News.
I am Stephanie Cox in New York City, and we are NTD News.
I'm Cindy Drucker in New York City, and we are NTD.
I'm Melina Wisecup on Capitol Hill, and we are NTD.
And there you have it, and welcome back to our special coverage of what was likely to be the first and last debate between former President Trump and Vice President Kamala Harris. Coming back now to our in-studio guest, political strategist and national trial attorney with Mills and Edwards, Dante Mills, and former Republican presidential campaign policy advisor, Bart Marcois. All right, guys, there you have it. It was a fiery night, you have to say, watching that play out. What were some of the biggest takeaways? Who performed well? Who struggled? And did the candidates meet expectations, in your opinion, Dante?
When I'm looking at this debate, I was coming in truly on the fence of what would happen. I knew it could go any way. And I think what happened here is it started with a nervous Vice President Harris. You could tell that she understood the moment and how big this was and the impact it could have. And it didn't help that the first topic was the economy, which is former President Trump's strong suit. There's just no denying that. But I think as the debate progressed, I think she turned the tide and she really got her footing. And as the debate progressed, I feel like former President Trump lost his footing a little bit. There were a couple of moments where he didn't seem happy and he felt the need to make that up. And I think once he did that, he started kind of chasing bad money. It started when he was talking about his health insurance plan and Obamacare and the fact that they were working on something and it would be out shortly, but they had stuff in the works. And then he felt the need to try and make something happen with his words, and it started to spin out of control a little bit. So I think ultimately at the end of this, when you leave the spin rooms and the news cycle starts back up tomorrow, I think they're going to have Vice President Harris as the winner of this debate, which she needed to happen. I don't think Trump needed to win this to win the election, but in order for Vice President Harris to have a chance, I think she needed to win this debate, and I think she did.
Bart?
I don't think she won it, but I agree she exceeded my expectations too. I expected her to fumble. I expected her to go into a word salad. She didn't. She was on point. She showed, Republicans fall into this trap all the time. Republicans have been saying, oh, she's so dumb. She's not capable. She's not dumb. She got where she is. However she got there, she got where she is by not being dumb. And she showed that she has mastery of her talking points, but her biggest biggest weaknesses were, and Trump hit it hard in his closing statement, there's nothing she can say that can make up for not having done anything for the last 3.5 years, not having done anything except damage things. Also, she said, I have a plan for this, I have a plan for this, I have a plan, 4 things, I think it was, or 3, 4 things. Every single plan that she said would improve Americans' lives was a subsidy. It was government spending of your money and yours and mine. And those plans don't solve problems. All they do is perpetuate them. And she doesn't have any plans. She did well, she played the cards well, but she has no cards. She has no policy, she has no policy platform. Trump really scored when he said, you know, you've taken so many of my policy points, you're kind of taking my whole platform. I was going to send you a MAGA hat. You know, it was funny, we all laughed, but it was also true, and it went straight to the heart of the weakness. There is no policy platform that is stamped as Kamala Harris other than price caps on food.
Well, she talks about an opportunity economy. And I think that's what everyone in America wants. And I agree with Bart that we don't want to go down the road of handouts, because then you have to sustain that.
Yeah.
And that's a problem. And my hope, and what I heard today, was more about opportunity, where she does have that $50,000 tax break for small business generation. So if you're starting, you know you have that cushion. I started my own firm, and I know that that would have been beneficial to me. I may have been able to hire somebody else early, which that's what grows the economy. So if she is shifting to that as opposed to just handouts, then I think that's what America wanted to hear. And I will say that when you heard from former President Trump, we have to simply listen to his words. What I don't want, and I'm bringing this up because I know what's going to happen, tomorrow and even tonight, we're going to hear, oh, I know what he said, but here's what he meant. Don't take what I know you're quoting him, but that's not what he meant. I don't want us to fall into that trap. We have to start believing what people say, because he knew what was on the line at this debate, and he said those things, so we have to hold him to it. And if we do that, then I think it's clear, you know, who was the winner of this debate. And I think the American public is going to be impacted coming out of this, because they have, many for the first time, had the opportunity to see Vice President Kamala Harris in her element. And I think she held up well tonight.
One of the big points this evening was about energy, specifically about fracking. Former President Trump mentioned it quite a bit. We'll play a soundbite.
I will not ban fracking. I have not banned fracking as Vice President of the United States. And in fact, I was the tie-breaking vote on the Inflation Reduction Act, which opened new leases for fracking. My position is that we have got to invest in diverse sources of energy so we reduce our reliance on foreign oil. We have had the largest increase in domestic oil production in history because of an approach that recognizes that we cannot over-rely on foreign oil.
I got the oil business going like nobody has ever done before. When they took over, they got rid of it, started getting rid of it, and the prices were going up the roof. But if she won the election, the day after that election, they'll go back to destroying our country, and oil will be dead, fossil fuel will be dead, we'll go back to windmills, and we'll go back to solar, where they need a whole desert to get some energy to come out of it. You ever see a solar plant? By the way, I'm a big fan of solar, but they take 400, 500 acres of desert.
So Bart, when we hear about fracking, those are, folks out in, Florida or Massachusetts may say, what does this have to do with me? But obviously, where the debate was being held in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, fracking means a lot. How does it not just affect Pennsylvanians, but also those of us in other parts of the country?
That's a great question, and it's important to understand what fracking is. It's a way of drilling for oil. Oil is trapped in porous rock, and we used to call it tight oil when it was trapped in rock. We couldn't get to it. But fracking fractures the sandstone and leaves in little bits of grit that keep the sandstone open so the oil can seep down to a central collection point. And it means that we can get oil that we have never been able to reach before. And with a low price of oil and a high amount of American oil, then oil prices go down, gasoline prices go down, energy, food prices go down, construction prices go down. You heard the economists about home building. Energy is an input into absolutely every part of the economy. The reason that so many people were prosperous under Trump's first term were, one, he unleashed every possible form of energy production, fossil everything else, and two, he lifted regulatory burdens and allowed people to simply produce what they wanted to produce, not just energy, but economic activity without a regulatory burden on them. It affects, somebody in the villages in Florida, it affects somebody in Minneapolis, it affects every single American. And these high energy prices, high oil prices, that's what has fueled the wars in the Middle East and Ukraine, because Russia and Iran have more money than they ever knew what to do with before. Trump alluded to that, but he didn't really. He has a habit of making a wide statement that people in the know understand, but if you don't know what he's talking about, you don't make that connection. And I wish he had made that connection, because that's critical to why people were prosperous and happier when he was president.
And that's also, if I can just add to that, those are phenomenal points with fracking. You do want to open those up, which this current administration have. We're producing more barrels of oil per month than ever before. And energy independence is really what we want as a nation, because we don't want to have to rely on China or any other nation for our energy. We want to be in a position where we can dictate and decide what we're producing, how much of it we're producing, and what we can do as a nation. We want to start building and manufacturing things here. That came up today when we were talking about tariffs. I wish they would have went into a little bit more of that policy, whether they were going to try and punish our way back into producing here or reward our way back into producing here, either punish with tariffs or reward with tax cuts for companies that want to come and manufacture here. But that has to be done so that we keep jobs in America and be able to grow ourselves without relying on anybody else to do that. So I'm glad that Vice President Harris has made it absolutely clear that she does not plan on limiting fracking at all. And in fact, mentioning that she was that deciding vote that allowed fracking to expand under this administration.
When it comes to the independents, especially the undecided voters and the swing states, that will be crucial to who wins in November. And given that New York Times Siena College poll that was released on Sunday, where only less than 10% said they feel they don't know or want to hear more about Trump, and more than a quarter, 28%, said they needed to hear more from Kamala Harris. Debate, do you think they learned enough, and will it be enough to sway those independents?
I think they did, because those are people who like his policies but don't like him. And he said something in an interview, I don't know, maybe about a week ago, 4 or 5 days ago. He said he was talking to the interviewer, and then he stopped and he looked in the camera and he said, I know there are people out there who don't like me, and you people, you don't have to like me, but like my policies, vote for me because you like my policies. I know you don't like me, I'm sorry, but vote for me because you like my policies. What they saw tonight is a guy that the grating factor was gone. He defended himself, but when he defended himself and he was making a point, he was funny about it. He gave some attack lines, but he's a guy that you can look at and say, okay, I can deal with listening to him for 4 years again. I can deal with that. I like his policies, and the personality factor, I think, was mitigated, and I think that wins over a large number of those independents.
Another thing, former President Trump was asked about his proposal calling for tariffs up to 20% on goods coming into the United States, especially as it relates to China. That's been the focal point. Vice President Harris has argued that it'll mean higher prices for Americans. Here's what Trump said about tariffs and how Harris responded.
Not going to have higher prices. What's going to have and who's going to have higher prices is China and all of the countries that have been ripping us off for years. I was the only president ever. China was paying us hundreds of billions of dollars, and so were other countries. And, you know, if she doesn't like them, they should have gone out and they should have immediately cut the tariffs. But those tariffs are there 3.5 years now under their administration.
Under Donald Trump's presidency, he ended up selling American chips to China to help them improve and modernize their military, basically sold us out, when a policy about China should be in making sure the United States of America wins the competition for the 21st.
And Dante, that was one of the more powerful moments that former President Trump had, where he said, hey, if you didn't like the tariffs, why didn't the administration you're involved with get rid of them?
He's absolutely right. But I think not only was he right with that comment, but just right with the policy. You can't. China is our #1 competitor. And they're looking to displace us as the greatest nation in the world. And we can't allow that door to be opened by having things like manufacturers in China that can send goods over here for cheaper than we can ever produce them here. That's not a winning combination. So we either have to tax those things coming in, put tariffs on them, or we have to incentivize people to build and manufacture in the United States. Those are the only two options, or some combination of in between. But what we can't do is say we're not going to tax people, we're going to let them sell here cheap, and it's also going to be too costly to build here or manufacture here. So again, my hope is that the Democratic Party, led now by Vice President Kamala Harris, recognizes that there has to be some kind of shift in policy where we figure out a way to get manufacturing happening in the United States so we can keep jobs here, so we can be able to employ people at places where they can start out in the mailroom or on the line and end up a vice president or supervisor and buy a home that way, take care of their families. That's the way our economy was built. We got away from that, but we do need to get back to it.
And Brother, you're sounding like a Republican. Come on over to our side.
Bart, let me ask you, though, there are a lot of people that are saying that the tariffs on China and other countries would ultimately be a tax on the American people. Do you see it that way?
No, I don't. And I'm a guy, I've been a free trader most of my life, a reflexive free trader. But China has exploited what we tried to make a level playing field. I'll give you a great example. President Trump alluded to it tonight. The NAFTA loophole. If a car is assembled or built in Mexico, it enters tariff-free under NAFTA. So China has built lock, stock, and barrel turnkey solution factories inside Mexico. It's Chinese money. There are Chinese workers there that they've imported into Mexico. It's all Chinese companies, but because they're assembled in Mexico, they're able to be sold in the United States without any tariff. And Trump wants to put a 100% tariff on anything manufactured under NAFTA by a country outside of NAFTA who's exploiting that loophole. That's going to bring jobs back to America, and that's going to make every American richer. We don't know how to make things anymore. We don't have people working in factories anymore. We have a lot of people going to school and getting degrees in, puppetry or whatever, and they can't make things. We need to make things here. He's appealing to that working class that used to have, they could have a boat, a Harley, and 2 cars on a factory worker's salary, and they don't anymore.
An important discussion, and let's actually go now to the ground where we do have our team there in Philly, where we have Iris Tao over there in the spin room, and we have Jason Blair over in the Harris launch party. Iris, beginning with you, what is it like over there?
So right now, the surrogates are all out talking about their candidates' respective performances. We just now heard from Vivek Ramaswamy as well as Senator J.D. Vance, Trump's running mate, about what they thought of Trump's performance tonight. Vivek Ramaswamy told us that he thinks Trump won on the issues, but stopped short of saying that Trump won it basically comprehensively. The undertone of his answers to the reporter was that this debate was different from the last one between Trump and Biden. He was saying how Biden and Harris work differently when it comes to mental cognitivity. And while his undertone was that Trump won on issues such as the economy and the border and abortion issues, but he stopped short of saying how the language in this debate would have played off with now the two different candidates versus the last debate. Meanwhile, we also heard from Senator J.D. Vance, who just now tried to tie Harris to the record of the Biden administration, which actually was the strategy that the Trump campaign told us would be what Trump will be taking tonight throughout the debate. But indeed, throughout the debate, we did not hear Trump doing too much of that. Instead, we know the Harris campaign strategy is to, quote, get under Trump's skin and to irritate him, to make him get sidetracked and not talk about the issues that he wanted to focus on. While we don't know how effective that strategy was tonight, we do know that right now the Trump surrogates who are talking behind me as right here are saying that on the issues, and they believe it was a win for Donald.
All right, other reporters. So let's bring it back in the room here in studio in HQ. Now we are actually going to toss it back to what we just heard in the debate. The contentious issue of abortion did come up relatively early in the debate. Here's what both candidates had to say about that. Let's refresh our memory.
And I pledge to you, when Congress passes a bill to put back in place the protections of Roe v. Wade, as President of the United States, I will proudly sign it into law. But understand, if Donald Trump were to be reelected, he will sign a national abortion ban.
I'm not signing a ban, and there's no reason to sign a ban because we've gotten what everybody wanted. Democrats, Republicans, and everybody else, and every legal scholar wanted it to be brought back into the states, and the states are voting. And it may take a little time, but for 52 years, this issue has torn our country apart, and they've wanted it back in the states.
And there you have it. It looks like we do have Jason Blair now out at the Harris debate watch party. Jason, if you can hear me, take it away. What's it like over there? What's the atmosphere like?
Yeah, so we're here at the watch party. The audience has been very attentive. There was a lot of cheering going on. People seem to be really happy about the debate performance by Kamala Harris. The DNC chair, Jamie Harrison, just came out on stage and said that there is a very special guest that's about to come out pretty soon. We're waiting for that now. We're going to see who that is. Secret Service is active right now, so it might be somebody pretty big. And as far as going to the debate, I mean, it looked like a lot of the strategies that were reported did pretty much more or less take place. As both candidates did talk a lot about their policies. Kamala Harris, in particular, really did echo a lot of things I've been seeing her talk about at her rallies, and also that they posted on her website that they just listed. And Trump was very quick with the responses and really kind of unpredictable. So it was interesting to see how that played out. And also, I talked earlier about how Harris's team originally was going to have Harris respond with a lot of questions if the mics were going to be on, but since the mics were muted, it seemed like she switched to more of a visual response while Trump was talking. I wonder if that played into their redoing the strategy when she was in Pittsburgh getting ready for the debate, as we saw her kind of visually reacting whenever Trump was speaking. So it was, very, very energetic crowd here. They seem to be pretty happy, and we'll see who comes out to talk here in a minute.
All right, Jason Blair there at the Harris campaign watch party. Thank you for that update. And let's bring it back in studio now, where we have Dante Mills and Bart Marcois. Now, we did just before Jason hear that sound from both of them talking about the issue of abortion, which has become quite a contentious issue. We did see that play into the 2022 midterms, where a lot of media was reporting a red wave. It seems like that issue of abortion really motivated the Democratic Party to come out and vote, and we saw how that resulted in the election. From a legal perspective, Dante, why don't you weigh in here when it comes to abortion? We keep hearing about, Trump saying, oh, this is now an issue that's gone back to the states. And then often we hear on the other side saying that, oh, no, we have to put Roe and Wade back into the law of the land. How should we be understanding this issue?
Well, that's not the way it works, where they would just put Roe v. Wade back into law. An issue would have to go back in front of the Supreme Court. It wouldn't be Roe versus Wade because that case is over. It would be another issue they would have to decide to take up. I can tell you that the way the Supreme Court operates, and they should, is they're forward thinking. They didn't make this decision based on a whim that the next case that comes up that's just like it, they're going to change their mind. That's just not how the Supreme Court is supposed to be. They're supposed to be a rock, right? Where you're comfortable that whatever decision comes out, you're going to be able to rely on that for the next 40 or 50 years. So Roe versus Wade is gone. Now the issue is with the states. And I think each state has their elections set up and they're putting those issues in front of the voters of those states. Overwhelmingly, the United States is saying we want abortion to be an option. I'm surprised I didn't hear former President Trump say the line he's been using, which is everyone follow your heart, because I think that works. What he's trying to do is find that perfect line of, okay, I'm protecting our babies, which there's a large group of the country that wants that to happen, but at the same time, I'm not completely taking away all of these women's rights. He's trying to find that balance, and he usually says, oh, I want to leave it with the states, but follow your heart. He tried to find that line here, and I think Vice President Harris did a great job of pointing out why it's so important for women to have options if there is incest or rape, things like that. So this played out as I expected it. I think people know where these candidates stand, and it doesn't change anybody's opinion, but they had to be strong with where they stood. And I wasn't surprised by anything said in this debate about the abortion issue.
And Bart, how do you see this playing into the election, especially, when it comes to top issues for voters, or why people will turn out to for voting on Election Day? We did see recently in a New York Times Siena College poll that the top issue for women in swing states under the age of 45 is now abortion. This is past the economy, where most of the other swing state polls are showing for the other groups of voters that the economy or immigration is their top issue. How do you see that fitting into the results come November?
There are two ways to motivate people to come out to the polls. And make no mistake, this election is a turnout election. It's who can turn out their base, who can turn out their supporters more than more than your opponent. And people will come because they love somebody, they want a policy, they want something to happen, or they will come because they fear what the opponent will do. The abortion issue is a fear-motivating issue. And I think Trump took the fear off the table sufficiently that 45% who say it's their top issue, let's look and see, but my guess is that'll be in the low 30s in the next poll within 2 weeks or 3 weeks. Because he said, look, I'm not the one that you need to fear. And he made the point over and over. He said, I'm not the extremist here. It's the Democrats who are the extremists on abortion. They are literally allowing abortions at 9 months gestation. And that's the law in Virginia. It's the law in Virginia it's a little cloudy, but it's the law in New York, it's the law in Washington, D.C., it's the law in Illinois, and I believe it's the law in Maryland. And Tim Walz has said he has no problem. He will put no restrictions whatsoever on a time limit for abortion. And most Americans find that, bizarre. We like to emulate Europe, especially the left likes to emulate Europe. There's not a single European country that allows abortion after 14 or 15 weeks.
I can't just let that sit.
We do, speaking of issues, there are a lot of issues to talk about tonight. One of the biggest issues facing the whole country is the issue of the economy. It was the first issue that was brought up tonight in the debate. So right now, let's go a little bit deeper into the issue of specifically grocery prices and inflation. Joining us now to do that is public policy analyst, professor of finance at Stockton University, and Epoch Times columnist Michael Busler. Michael, thank you so much for joining us.
Here.
Now, Michael, when it comes to lowering food prices, the vice president is laying blame on price gouging. So she's proposing a federal ban on this practice. Firstly, how much of the food inflation that we've been seeing since 2021, how much of that could be attributed to this price gouging?
Well, I don't think very much, if any. So what is the definition of price gouging? So price gouging occurs when the market price of a product is higher than somebody thinks it should be. And just to say that it was corporations that just all of a sudden decided to raise prices for the last 40 years, they didn't do that. Just to say, well, now they decided to raise prices as much, and that's what caused inflation, I don't believe is correct. Her remedy to that is to say that we're going to pass legislation that makes it illegal to raise prices, or at least raise prices above a certain point. The last time that was tried in the U.S., Richard Nixon in 1971, we had an inflation problem. He said, well, I'm going to put a price freeze on. For 3 months, nobody's allowed to raise prices. Well, there was no inflation for 3 months. It did create shortages of products, which happens when prices are below market equilibrium. And then finally, when the 3 months expired, prices went up even more. So price controls are really not the answer to fight inflation.
And Michael, to your point, it did have an adverse effect in the situation that you played out. And if you could just sort of break down, I guess, the complex nature of putting a federal ban on price gouging into practice.
It's very difficult. So you have to pass a law, and then there has to be some way to monitor virtually everyone. It's very difficult to implement. It does create shortages, and it doesn't hold prices down in the long run. So on the other side, what does President Trump offer? Now, they didn't get to talk too much about this, but President Trump has said much of the inflation that we have is due to rising energy prices. And he may note that energy prices account for about 30% of the consumer price index. Not just you pay more for heating oil and gasoline, et cetera, but it's more, businesses pay more to manufacture products. Farmers are paying more for fuel to make agricultural goods. So rising energy prices contributed significantly to the inflation problem. So what does President Trump say? Well, if prices are too high, what you should do is increase the supply of the product. So he says, look, we're going to allow the Keystone Pipeline to be built. We're going to allow drilling on federal lands. We're going to take away some of the regulations that will significantly increase the supply of energy, and that will bring energy prices down. President Trump says we can get gasoline prices down in the $2.50 range, and he believes that will be a big step toward bringing the inflation down.
And Michael, to your point, to the former president's proposed strategy of putting more emphasis on things like you mentioned, gas, oil, and coal. Talk to us in practice how this could essentially lead to lower inflation and lower prices, and how it affects, say, like you mentioned, the cost of farming and food processing.
Yeah, energy is such an important product, not just for the economy, but geopolitically, it's an important product. We were energy independent as of 2020, and of course that changed under the new administration. But look, if you can allow oil companies to start drilling again on federal lands, allow the Keystone Pipeline to be built, it will significantly increase the supply of oil. Now, the Democrats and Harris will argue back, well, wait a minute, we're producing more oil today than we did at any time. And that's true, just because market demand has increased in the last few years. However, if we had not canceled the Keystone Pipeline, and if we had not withdrawn those leases on federal lands, we would probably be producing about 1 million to 1.5 million barrels more per day now than we are currently producing. That will drop the price of gasoline, drop the price of oil. It would also mean we're not dependent on anybody for energy, and that would be a big step towards solving the inflation problem.
Michael, thank you so much for your perspective. Really appreciate you joining us.
My pleasure.
And we now have some breaking news for you. Taylor Swift has officially endorsed Vice President Kamala Harris. The announcement ends lots of speculation about whether the superstar singer would actually share her political views ahead of November's election. In an Instagram post, Swift said, quote, "I'm voting for Kamala Harris because she fights for the rights and causes I believe need a warrior to champion them. I think she is a steady-handed, gifted leader, and I believe we can accomplish so much more in this country if we are led by calm and not chaos." Swift also urging first-time voters to register. The singer signed her post, "Childless Cat Lady." That's a reference to the term used by Trump's running mate, Senator J.D. Vance, to describe women who did not have children. Back in 2020, Swift also supported Biden and Harris in their bid for the White House. And with that said, we'll bring it back in studio. Bart, you reacted as I was reading it. You know, we have to say, she has a very, very huge following.
This changes everything. I think I'm going to have to vote for Harris now because Taylor Swift said so. I mean, it's earth-shattering. You know, no, everybody knew she was supporting Kamala Harris. Everybody knew that she would have supported Biden.
But will this tilt the election?
No. Not going to change a single vote.
I think we're overlooking the importance of social media in our society today if we say this has no bearing on the election. She has 283 million followers. Yeah. And there's people who are going to go register to vote now. There's people who are going to repost that to somebody who was on the fence about either registering or who they were going to vote for, and it's going to have an impact. You just said, rightly so, Bart, that this is an outcome election, and it's going to be close. Yeah. So if 1% of her 283 million followers decide to look into politics more deeply, it could impact the outcome of this election.
Yeah,
so
you got a point
you
there.
can't overlook this. And maybe, you know, she was slated to vote as a Democrat, who knows? But the fact that she came out and announced, especially after the debate, so now people are going to think, oh, she's doing it because it was such a strong debate. You know, all of that plays into an effect, and it steamrolls into making a difference.
And you could tell for a while, former President Trump was trying to court that endorsement, if you will.
Yeah. Well, and he also is courting young voters. He's courting African-American voters, especially African-American males. He's courting Hispanic voters. He's courting women voters. He keeps saying, women, you know, they say you don't like me, but, you know, come on, like me. You know, like what I do. And he's making real inroads by going to social media, and interestingly, it's his son, Barron, who is telling him, Dad, you got to go on this podcast and this podcast and this podcast. And he's sitting down, and it's a great contrast with Harris, who is avoiding any media contact. He has had something like 47 interviews in the last 3 weeks. He'll sit down with anybody and sit down with them for an hour and let them speak in a really freewheeling discussion.
And I guess we'll just have to wait in suspense to see what Travis Kelce does. And with that said, Trump and Harris did spar over the Israel-Hamas war. We're going to play a bit of that exchange.
Israel has a right to defend itself. We would. And how it does so matters. Because it is also true, far too many innocent Palestinians have been killed. Children, mothers. What we know is that this war must end. It must end immediately, and the way it will end is we need a ceasefire deal and we need the hostages out. I will always give Israel the ability to defend itself, in particular as it relates to Iran, and any threat that Iran and its proxies pose to Israel. But we must have a two-state solution where we can rebuild Gaza, where the Palestinians have security, self-determination, and the dignity they so rightly deserve.
If I were president, it would have never started. If I were president, Russia would have never, ever, I know Putin very well, he would have never, and there was no threat of it either, by the way, for 4 years, have gone into Ukraine and killed millions of people when you add it up, far worse than people understand what's going on over there. If she's president, I believe that Israel will not exist within 2 years from now. And I've been pretty good at predictions, and I hope I'm wrong about that one. She hates Israel. At the same time, in her own way, she hates the Arab population because the whole place is going to get blown up. Arabs, Jewish people, Israel will be gone. It would have never happened. Iran was broke under Donald Trump. Now Iran has $300 billion because they took off all the sanctions that I had. Iran had no money for Hamas or Hezbollah or any of the 28 different spheres of terror. And they are spheres of terror, horrible terror. They had no money. It was a big story, and you know it. You covered it very well, actually. They had no money for terror. They were broke. Now they're a rich nation, and now what they're doing is they're spreading that money around. Look at what's happening with the Houthis and Yemen. Look at what's going on in the Middle East. This would have...
And before we react to that soundbite, we're getting reports that Kamala Harris and her husband, the second gentleman, Doug Imhoff, are actually at the watch party, apparently taking a victory lap. There you have the vice president right there, addressing the crowd. I don't know if we have the feed to tune in or not. But with that said, there she is. We'll be reporting on what she's saying. We do have a reporter there on the ground at the watch party, Jason Blair, so he will certainly give us an update in just a bit on what is being said there. So we'll keep an eye on that for everybody. In the meantime, we'll bring it back in studio here. Dante, when it comes to the Israel-Hamas war, I would have to say that that is, more of a delicate, issue for Kamala Harris to have to weave, because you have the issue of her needing to win over that Muslim vote in Michigan. How do you think she did tonight when asked?
Well, first of all, I'll just start by addressing the fact that she's speaking now. I think it's brilliant for her and her team to follow through with this, what seems to be a victory lap. Obviously, perception, it becomes reality. We talk about the spin room, the media room. This is her doing her own spin and saying, I stood up and I fought Goliath. And anointing herself as David, I think, will help her in that regard. So it does make sense she's doing this. As far as when you talk about Israel and Palestine, I think Vice President Harris has been consistent with that for a long time. She talked about it at the convention. She's talked about it here now when she did the sit-down interview. She talked about making sure we support Israel no matter what, with as many weapons as they need to protect themselves, whatever they need to make sure that what happened on October 7th never happens again. We are behind them 100%. And it's not a but, it's just at the same time, we want to make sure that innocent lives aren't being lost and that Palestinians have a right to life. And I don't think that those two things conflict at all. And she's made it clear that that's her stance. Every time she talks about it, she's firm and lets everyone involved know, I'm not budging off of that. I'm going to make sure Israel is protected, but we don't need innocent people dying. And I think that her saying that she's going to work as hard as she can to find that middle ground that works for everybody is what she needs to do, and hopefully she gets it done.
Bart, is it an issue of, just trying to be, having it both ways? Or is it, to Dante's point, something where, two things can be true at once?
Two things can be true at once, but I don't believe that these two things can be true at once with the current people in charge. I'm a former American diplomat. I was a State Department Arabist. I'm fluent in Arabic. I lived in the Middle East. I've worked in the Middle East for 30 years. I'm also a lifelong Zionist. And those two things are true at once. But Israel cannot make peace with the Palestinians under the leadership of Hamas. They absolutely cannot do it. Hamas's charter swears to kill every Israeli, to wipe every Israeli off the earth. And they say, and then we will come after every Jew, and then we will come after the rest of the world. That's their founding charter. How do you make middle ground with somebody whose sworn goal is to kill you, your family, everyone who is like you and related to you, and then take over the world? That is Hamas. They cannot. They absolutely cannot. The people that were killed on October 7th, those were Israeli leftists. They were at a peace festival, the music festival. They purposely staged it right next to to Gaza, within a quarter mile of the border of Gaza, because they were making a point. Look, we're safe. We're happy. This is how we can live. And they were brutally murdered and brutally tortured on the way to murder. And there are still hostages being held, some of them American citizens. You cannot make peace with a group like that. You have to have Hamas completely rooted out. Palestinian people, I literally have hundreds of Palestinian friends. I lived in Jordan. Half of Jordan is Palestinian. I literally have several hundred Arab friends. Some of them are angry at me because I'm a Zionist and because I'm saying this, and they're very emotional. But those people are suffering as much or more because they have no hope for liberty or freedom when Hamas is there. You cannot talk about a two-state solution as a reward for the most brutal carnage of Jews since the Holocaust. Hamas, Palestinians, Arabs, Muslims worldwide will interpret that as saying, look, what we need is more things like that. Because look, it was bad, it was horrible, but it got us something, it made progress. You cannot reward that kind of carnage.
If we can just clarify, Hamas has been named by Vice President Harris as a terrorist organization.
Yeah.
And they must be taken down, no question about it.
Yeah.
So I just want to make sure that we're separating Hamas from Palestinians, because Palestinians do have a right to life, despite the fact that Hamas is a terrorist organization that must be destroyed.
And that's the challenge, is separating Hamas from Palestinians, because Hamas purposely embeds themselves in civilian populations. The reason there are more tunnels, 3 times the length of tunnels under Gaza as the subways of New York City, they did that so that they could position their fighting forces under kindergartens, under hospitals, under schools, under civilian population centers. And they did it, by the way, with concrete that was donated because international aid agencies were giving them money and they spent it on weapons. And so they said, okay, no more money. We'll give you concrete to build housing for the suffering Palestinians who've been living in refugee camps for 70 years. And instead, they used the concrete to build tunnels underneath, and the Palestinians are still living in squalor. That is what, you're right. You must separate them. And I'm sorry, it sounds so brutal, but unless you can reform the Hamas fighters, they will not stop fighting until they're dead. It's not a matter of Israeli intransigence. The Israelis will continue fighting them as long as they're fighting, and it's a horrible situation. But you have to understand that.
I don't know if we could pull the feedback up of the spin room. Former President Trump was just making the rounds through there as we saw Vice President Kamala Harris left the venue, because there is some distance. Not too much between the spin room and the debate room, and also where Kamala Harris was. There's another look back into the spin room where former President Trump did address them in the media. He's still there. You can see the scrum of reporters just trying to get that sound to see what he's saying. And yeah, it's very interesting. Typically, this is an area where the president or the candidates' surrogates would be, high-level surrogates, talking to folks, not necessarily the candidate themselves. Maybe we can comment on that, Dante. I mean, we just saw Kamala Harris at the watch party, not necessarily the spin room, This seems like a pretty interesting approach.
Listen, this is politics. I would not be surprised if former President Trump's team got wind that Kamala Harris was speaking at her event and said, we got to get out there. We got to go somewhere, right? They're still in the spin room. It's right down the hallway. Let's just show up and show face. And I think it would be a great move, of course. Yeah. You can't let her have this spotlight by herself, parading around like she just destroyed you and you're kind of cowering in a room somewhere. So he found cameras and he jumped in front of them, and I think it was the right thing to do.
Yeah, it was. It was. You know, we were talking earlier about the economy, and we didn't touch on something that I was hoping they would touch on tonight. Trump, again, came in the neighborhood, but he didn't nail it down, and that is what it means that inflation is so high and what it means for the United States dollar. We are sitting here on a house of cards. We're sitting here, we're wearing nice clothes, we've come to a nice place, traffic is going, everything's happening as if life is normal. But our debt, the debt that America has, do you know that we are paying $3 billion per day in interest on the debt? Stop and think about what that means. $3 billion a day in interest alone. Interest on the debt is the single biggest category of expenditure in the United States budget. That is unsustainable. We're only able to do this because the dollar is the world's reserve currency. And there is a movement afoot to undermine the dollar. The BRICS countries, Brazil, Russia, India, China, Saudi Arabia, are looking to create an alternative basket of currencies. President Trump said 2 or 3 days ago, he said, I will put 100% tariffs on every product from any country that tries to use another currency as the international reserve currency. So he gets it. I wish he had said it tonight. That you pull one card, or maybe Jenga is a better example. You pull one stick out and the whole thing comes collapsing. We turn into the Weimar Republic. We turn into Argentina in the 1970s. Nobody will take our dollars. Nobody will want American dollars, and they will not be worth anything. And we will be the ones with wheelbarrows full of cash, or we'll be like the people in, I forget what city, I think it was Hainan, China, today, it was hit by floods and all the internet and electronics went down. They have a cashless society and they can't buy anything because they can't recharge their phones. We will be like that. We'll all have to move out west and farm. We're not gonna, if the dollar goes down, everything, the world as we know it, goes down, especially for the United States.
That's absolutely correct. If the dollar goes down, the entire world, I think, just the economic
whole
structure of the world collapses. But former President Trump did not go into that because people don't follow that. Their follow-up question is going to be, so how much will milk cost then?
Yeah.
Well, how much, would I be able to buy bread or no?
Yeah.
That's what the follow-up is. So these candidates have to make sure that they're protecting us in the right now and in the long run. And that's what I think the country really needs to be looking for in trying to hear these economic policies. How can someone in America who wants to better themselves have an opportunity to do so and better the position for their family? But also we have to look some generations down the road, and we can't keep spending and letting interest go up and all of that kind of stuff, because it does put us in a tight spot. So what we wanted to hear is a plan for now, but understanding that person is also going to be mindful of the future of our nation. We don't want to be the Roman Empire that never feels it can fall, and then it's in the history book. So I think the focus for most voters is going to be right now, but we have to trust that whoever's coming into office has the foresight to make sure that we're protected in the future.
And that is a perfect segue, because now to talk more about China and the impact the candidates' stances and proposals could have on foreign policy, joining us is former chair of NATO's high-level group and former Secretary of Defense official, Mary Beth Long. Mary Beth, thank you so much for joining us. Great to see you again. Now, President Biden has retained the tariffs imposed on China by former President Trump as a check on the regime's unfair business practices. Biden's actually built on them, and Harris's campaign says she supports targeted and strategic tariffs. Now, how beneficial have tariffs been in our negotiations with China in terms of advancing U.S. interests other than fair business practices?
I don't think it's had a major impact on our trade balance is better under the tariffs, of course. But I don't think as far as overall leverage, it's had a tremendous impact on China. China and other fields supporting Russia and some of the meddling in, of course, Indo-PACOM area and in the Middle East has increased. So to the extent it's sending messages, I'm not sure that it's deterred China from bad behavior.
Now, former President Trump is proposing escalating tariffs to incentivize more independence from China, which could lead potentially to higher prices for Americans at home in the short term. Now, Harris has criticized this aspect of the Trump tariffs. Do you see the potential benefits of this tariff policy outweighing the impact it could have on prices?
Yes, and in fact, probably one of the reasons why, although Vice President Harris criticizes the tariffs, a substantial amount of the Trump tariffs that she now complains about actually were retained by the Biden administration. And part of that is, of course, because of the economic benefit we get from them. But it also was designed, as you point out, to make us more resilient and for us to become more responsible for some of the products that we are buying from the Chinese at artificially lower prices.
Now, China didn't come up that much tonight. For instance, fentanyl was brought up, but didn't trace it back to the precursors predominantly coming and originating from China. When it came to the green energy movement, we didn't really delve into the reliance America now has on China for the rare earth minerals and materials that go into those products, as well as, say, investments in all these other areas. Right now, Congress is having China Week, where they're voting on a slew of bills aimed at countering China. In terms of this debate and whoever is the next president, what would you like to have heard more of from each candidate when it comes to China?
Well, first of all, I think while the President Biden speaks of China as being our most important strategic threat, and I think he's right on that. If you look at the recent policy statements by Vice President Harris, she seems to put Europe and America's influence in what we're doing in Europe as a higher priority than China. And I think that's a mistake. I think she should have stuck with where she is with Biden. Trump is very inarticulate, frankly, a bit about where he feels China falls as far as whether it's our most strategic challenge or actually a threat. I think we are increasingly seeing in the last 3 years China become increasingly not only involved in the Middle East, but they are probing militarily Japanese territorial waters and airspace. Same with Taiwan. A little more granularity. Is it only an economic issue with China, or are we going to do more militarily? What are we going to do diplomatically? And what are we going to do to help our partners work with us, not making them choose between us and China, but to draw some very clear red lines about information exchanges with China, role of China in IT like Huawei, and not sharing very important technological developments with China.
Mary Beth Long, thank you so much for joining us and sharing your perspectives tonight.
Thank you.
And just moments ago, we saw former President Trump in the spin room, and we're going to take you there right now, where NTD's Iris Tao is standing by with us. Iris, what can you tell us? What was the former president saying?
So just now, from President Trump himself ventured into this crowded spin room. We've got like almost, I think, 100 people crowded into this tiny space just now trying to listen to him. And he basically said that this was his greatest debate ever, and went on to tout his poll numbers, saying how it's in a very high percentage. And he also said that Harris is now immediately calling for a second debate because she thinks she lost, and that's according to Trump's perspective. He also went on to criticize the ABC News network, saying how the network was unfair, the moderators were unfair to him. And actually his campaign as well, in their statement right after the debate, said that Trump basically did a 3-on-1 debate tonight with the moderators siding with Vice President Kamala Harris. Meanwhile, that's the same talking point we heard tonight by Vivek Ramaswamy, who earlier told us that he thinks the moderators were not fair enough, but on the issues that he believes Trump has won this debate. But we also heard from some Democrats in the spin room, including Governor Roy Cooper, who said that Trump lost, especially on the healthcare issue and on the issue of the 2020 election. We know that during the debate, January 6th, as well as Obamacare were among the top issues. And Trump did dodge a question when it comes to what an alternative plan he would come up when it comes to Obamacare, saying that he has the concept for a new plan, but without offering many details. And tonight we're still seeing many surrogates surrounding here, talking with reporters, and we'll continue bringing you the latest from this spin room. Back to you.
NTD's Iris Tao reporting live there from Philadelphia in the spin room post-debate. Thank you, Iris. And coming back in studio, we have Bart Marcois and Dante Mills. So guys, Bart, do you think that anything ultimately moved the needle tonight? Did the debate move the needle for either candidate?
I think it did, but not very much. Not by what people were hoping. I think that Kamala Harris probably stemmed the losses that we've seen creeping up, that we saw in the Siena poll. It'll be interesting to see what Nate Silver does going into it. He had Trump, I think the last number I saw, 64% likely to win the election. I think that will go down a little, but I think Trump solidified his support among a significant portion of the independents. So I think each of them, she probably rose a point, he probably rose 1.5 points or 2 points. Not enough. It's still a dead heat. There was no knockout punch.
Dante, social media is reacting right now. Twitter talking about the fact that maybe ABC, the moderators weren't necessarily fair to former President Trump in terms of the line of questioning, also the follow-ups, the pressing, the fact-checking going one way. What is your assessment of that?
I think the more we hear from Vice President Harris and the more we hear from former President Trump, the differences are really starting to show. And I think former President Trump needs to be careful how much he goes out there, especially if Vice President Harris is going to be around, because she's exposing him some. And I think she did that tonight. Some of his actions are getting a little tired. He starts to rambling, and I think people are going to get over it. Automatically after this debate, he's now making the excuse of, oh, it was a 3-on-1 because he was fact-checked, right? The comment that was made by the moderator was, just so it's clear, there is no state in this country where you can kill somebody, kill a child after they're born. That's just a fact. So the fact that he said something along those lines and someone called him out on it, I don't think that's the network being against Donald Trump. I think that's the network making sure the American people just aren't confused on what should be an issue that should have never come up. So I think that former President Trump has to be mindful, because people are starting to get tired of that act with the excuses every time, the pointing fingers, the blaming, and he should really stick to policy and hope that this election comes sooner than later, because it looks like Vice President Harris is gaining momentum.
And now, Bart, we're getting reports that the Harris campaign is now calling for a second debate, a sign that maybe they're feeling. I know Trump, as Iris reported, saying that's a sign they didn't do well. Some might interpret that as a sign that they did well and want more of it. There's also the question of whether or not she will go to a Fox News debate. What do you make of this proposal?
I sincerely hope there is a second debate. This one was too light on substance. There was not enough there. They got their jabs at each other. They trotted out all of their practice lines. Let's have another debate that's just on policy, just on what really will happen, what has happened. We have his term to compare to her term, hers and Biden's. Let's have a true comparison. I would love a second debate. I think it would be marvelous.
When it comes to Trump's comment on the moderators or all the posts we are seeing on social media, we did hear, the two moderators going after Trump or fact-checking him. When it came to, some of Harris, the vice president's statements, we didn't seem to hear that much fact-checking. We also heard a lot of, say, pain points, if you will, for the former president, January 6th, questioning the election results of the 2020 election, and also, questioning Harris's race. How do you read that, especially when it comes to independents who are tuning into this debate to learn more about the candidates? How do you think they viewed that line of questioning? Did it help them, convince them in either way? Are they moving more towards Harris, more towards Trump, maybe still undecided?
It's hard to predict, isn't it? Because, this is like the Bush versus Gore and Bush versus Kerry races. I don't see how somebody could be torn between the two sides. I think the two sides are so, clearly different. I don't understand how they can be undecided or how they can look at it and say, I don't see a difference. But I think that when people look at what the moderators did, they will see that there was not a single fact check against Harris. There were many against Trump. Although Harris said a lot of things that were simply untrue. The Project 2025 thing, she tried it out twice or three times. There are several things like that. And I think that you're going to see more of that in the next couple of days from the echo chamber in the media. I wrote an article a few months ago called something about swamp talk. Swamp talk is where they take something you said, turn it into something you didn't say, using some of the same words, but making it something you didn't say, and then attack you for what you didn't say. And that becomes the accepted narrative. And I think what we saw tonight was the foundation for more swamp talk, and we'll see what happens in the next few days. That's my fear.
I do think it was interesting that, one of those potential fact checks could have been the Charlottesville comment that she made. That has been fact checked by Snopes, who's not necessarily to the right of things. And Trump failed to actually mention that. He mentioned Fox News. We do have to go to the watch party for Kamala Harris in Philadelphia, where we have NTD's Jason Blair standing by. Jason, Vice President Harris showing up there, essentially what looked like to be a victory lap. From what we're hearing, that's where she said that she would like a second debate. Is that true? What did you hear from her?
Yeah, she did show up. It was a big surprise. The Secret Service was here. I had a feeling someone big was coming, and then the DNC chair came out and was like, a special guest is going to come out. Everybody was crowding around waiting to hear, and then even they announced Doug Emhoff, and then Harris came out behind him. So it really was a big surprise. People were very excited. And one of the first things she said when she came out was, we saw two different versions, versions of policy from the debate. And she didn't really talk about anything regarding a second debate. I know Rep. Jason Crow did mention that in an interview, I think recently, that Harris is up for a second debate. Harris did not touch on that tonight, but she really hammered in that we still, the campaign has a lot of work to do, and she was trying to get, people motivated and excited and to keep at it. Some of the other things she said, she said today was a good day. She seemed happy with how the debate went. And then she did mention, we're still the underdogs, which is something that the campaign has been saying a lot lately, and there have been mixed reactions with that. However, if you look at it as far as, do people know more about her or Trump? Maybe in that area, she might still might be the underdog. At least nobody has, said anything against that. But this was a good night for her to really, show all those undecided voters that don't know a lot about her and have been asking a lot about her, to give them a vision of what she's about. But so we'll see about the second debate, and we'll see what happens with that.
NTD's Jason Blair live from the watch party there. We appreciate it, Jason. Thank you for that reporting. and bringing it back in studio. Dante, get your thoughts on this the second debate proposal.
If I was Vice President Harris, I would be chomping at the bit to get out there again. And if I was former President Trump's team, I would not. I would say that, I would try to spend this and say, oh, on this issue, we made our points that we needed to make. We've debated already 2 separate candidates. There's no reason for us to do it again, because I don't see how a win comes out of it. And anything short of a win, the pointing fingers, the blaming other people, all of that may come again, and people are starting to get tired of it. I'll answer the question that Bart posed about how could somebody be torn in this election. I think it's pretty clear there's a lot of people that are looking at this saying, I love what Trump can do for the economy, but I just can't get behind him. That's where the tear is. Not that the policies are so similar, but it's, do I go policy or do I have compassion as a person? It feels like that's what the decision is coming down to. If you want a leader that you can be proud of, or if you think your pocketbook is going to be a little bit heavier. That's what it seems like this election is coming down to. And every time these 2 people are going to be close to each other in the same room, that distinction is going to become brighter and brighter. And I think that people are going to start to fall off the middle.
And
just before we go to you, Bart, we do have to go to NTD's election data analyst, Dave Martin, for a quick update. Dave, what do you have for us?
Thank you, Tiff. Now, as we take a break from discussing this debate, let's take a look down the road at what's coming up next as far as debates are concerned. October 1st, here, that's 3 weeks from today, we have the vice presidential debate that'll be between Tim Walz and J.D. Vance. Now, both of these guys have, of course, military backgrounds that have been heavily scrutinized by the media. I'm sure that'll be a major topic of discussion. This will be hosted by CBS News. Moderators will be Norah O'Donnell, who is the anchor for CBS Evening News, as well as Margaret Brennan, who is the moderator for Face the Nation with Margaret Brennan. Now, after that, nothing's actually set up yet, but it has come out tonight that Kamala Harris is looking for a second debate with Donald Trump. Of course, they still have to figure out the date and, of course, who is going to host it. Will it be Fox News or whoever? We're not actually sure yet, but it sounds like there will be a second debate. Not sure about Vance and Walz if they'll have a second one as well. Now, going forward, it'll be interesting to see after tonight how the polls react to this debate. Now, obviously, the June debate between Trump and Biden did not recover from that debate. That was pretty much a game over for him. The Democrats ended up replacing him, obviously, with Harris. I wouldn't expect anything that dramatic, of course, this time around, but we'll have to see. Right now, though, let's go back to you guys at the desk.
Updates throughout the night, and back here at our desk, Bart Marcois, Dante Mills. Bart, I will let you respond now to this talk about a second potential debate between Harris and Trump. Obviously, this was the second presidential debate this year, but the first one between Harris and Trump. So your comments on that, but also your final thoughts on how this debate went.
Okay, so Trump will definitely, if she's issuing the challenge, he'll take it up in a heartbeat. He can't help himself. That's, if somebody punches, he punches back. If they challenge, he challenges back. He'll take it up in a heartbeat. And I think he will lay down some rules and he'll say, okay, we had it at your network. Let's have it at my network. Let's maybe have some talk radio hosts come in and be the moderators. People who really talk for 3 hours a day about these topics and are really more well-versed in them than a lot of people that are in broadcast media. And as far as this debate went, I think that by not losing, Harris came out in a positive position. I think the majority of people expected her to lose. They thought that Trump was going to deliver a knockout blow, or that she was going to talk herself into a knockout blow. I think she reassured people that the word salads, I don't know where they come from, but that she can function without them. And I think that's a strong positive for her out of this. But I also think, as I said before, that Trump did himself a huge favor by by simply saying, you know, yes, I will fight. Yes, I will defend myself. But he said over and over and over, I will fight for the American people. I'm doing this for the American people. He's a multi-billionaire. He doesn't have to do this. He doesn't have to. He could go home and be happy and do cameos on movies for the rest of his life. But he's doing this for the American people, and he's making that clear.
And Dante, your final thoughts?
Yes, I'll say what former President Trump has going for him is he has a persona, a huge persona.
Yeah.
And he impacts everyone around him. So I believe him when he says that there's leaders around the world who did not act because they were afraid of what he would do. I believe that. I think the American people believe that, and they see him and they have that confidence that he'll protect us. So Vice President Harris had the responsibility to go in there and essentially be that David versus Goliath and show that she can stand in the same arena and not be destroyed. And I think she did that. I don't think the debate was close. I think she actually won pretty handedly. But even if not, even if it was close, she showed that she deserves to be in that room. She can compete at that level. And I think there's Americans looking at it like, if she can go up against Donald Trump and not get knocked down, I'm comfortable with her going up against other world leaders. And that may have been the biggest knock on her at this point. So I think she did herself a favor today, and I'm interested to see what happened. I would love to see a second debate. We'll see if we get there.
Well, this has certainly been a fascinating and important discussion. That does conclude our special coverage of the second presidential debate.
We do want to thank everyone for joining us tonight.
I'm Steve Lance.
And I'm Tiffany Meier. From all of us here at NTD, have a good night. And remember, stay informed and always seek the truth.